Hi everyone, welcome to Babbling Irons. So today is to review the day after the Bayer Leverkusen result. Not necessarily a surprising result given the opposition, but nonetheless a result where I feel tinged with disappointment, frustration, and despite the brilliance of the opposition, it's one that we let get away from us. Sloth, what are your initial thoughts?
Look, I think I kind of put out a tweet and people there was a bit of reaction to it where I said that, what disappointed me the most was that early on we had a good chance and we got at them, and I kind of thought, if that's the game plan for the 90, then fair enough. That is exactly what Karabakh did when they hit them, for 4 goals over 2 games. They broke on the counter and they used pace. But obviously Paqueta picked up a stupid yellow card. We'll go into that display, but he picked up a stupid yellow card and his game had to completely change. So I think we were very much hamstrung. We were hamstrung by numerous issues, that not excuses. But it was a really disappointing performance from the end of the game. But I think for 80 minutes, and this is exactly what we were talking about in the preview, where we were talking about just how sharp Bayer Leverkusen are and the strength they have in depth and up top, and that's what really shone through in the end. And it will lead on to the inevitable rant we're going to have later on. But I think I think anyone who's looking at that purely based on stats it's gonna look like a completely one-sided affair. And in many ways it was very one-sided, but it doesn't tell you it doesn't give you the full picture. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say I enjoyed watching any of the game. I didn't. Like my chest was sore for the full kind of like 95 minutes in total. But it was 2-0 away. It's not a terrible score. And what kind of got me flack was I said, if we have Bowen fit and with Alvarez, I don't think it matters with regards to Paqueta, because we're going to have to be more defensive anyway. We're going to have to have that option of sitting deeper and soaking up pressure. And if you have Souček and Alvarez who can do that for you and, win it down, knock it down to James Ward-Prowse, who can play a through ball, that's a good option. It's not the same as Paqueta, but it's a good option. And I think the key thing is if we have Bowen. Now, obviously, going back to last night, I am disappointed. I think they would feel like they deserved a 2-0, but I think it's kind of harsh on our defending. I think we were very solid at the back. Apart from the headed save that Fabianski made, which was fantastic, I don't really feel like they worked the keeper much. And I think that the 31 shots that they did have, I think that is very flattering in terms of how much they made us work or how much they made Fabianski work. But look, it was a typical park the bus display, and I'll make no bones about that. But I would struggle to say that anyone who watched that last night and thinks that the tie is dead, it's very much balanced on the first goal of the next leg. If Leverkusen get the first goal, I think it is probably it is curtains. But if we get the first goal and if we can get the place rocking, I think it will be a different story.
Yeah, that's something that I tweeted out earlier. Obviously, appreciation about Antonio. We'll get into him because I think he deserves a whole piece actually dedicated to him in this one because he was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I made that point. An early goal next week, it could change it, especially if Antonio plays the way he did, and we look to use him as we did in a couple of instances where he really gave Tar a torrid time and their defence. There was another couple of great moments from in the first half, which we'll go into anyway. But to make your point about the shots, look at this graphic. That's the entire game. That's all of the shots, but you can see a lot of them were from range and from distance. We really did actually stifle them. They did have obviously quite a number of shots in the area, but they weren't necessarily threatening. There was a couple of instances in the first half where Fabianski obviously had to make a couple of smart saves. But by and large, from a defensive point of view, whilst we conceded shots, they weren't necessarily shots that were easy to score from. They weren't opportunities that they were getting a great advantage from. And we forced them to be speculative. We really did frustrate them in that first half. And there's a lot. We've criticised him a lot this season, but I thought Zuma at the start of the match showed good, captain qualities, got the team together, and we were really strong defensively.
No, I completely agree, and I think if you'd watched that first 45 minutes and we'd continued on like that, I think that we showed a little bit more bite, and just going into the one shot that we did have on target, it's fantastic centre forward play from Antonio, who I quite frankly thought had Tar on toast from open play. He was fantastic last night, and people
that run in itself was brilliant. It's a great ball down the side. That's what frustrated me. We didn't stop playing that ball. We then was then hitting it too high, which was making it easy for Tar, rather than hitting it towards the chest height or trying to feed it down the side. We just seemed to we've done it once, let's not do it again. And it just seemed a bit weird that we seemed to negate that, apart from that one point where Antonio decided, I'm going to do this on my own. And he took on 3 of their defenders, and then rightly had to go at Paqueta because he wasn't bursting into the back post. I do think Antonio could have done better with his final deliveries and got his head up a bit more, because I think if he had, probably would have been able to have found him better.
Well, the second attempted flick that he does, you can tell he's trying to go a different way, and his touch takes it the other way. So it's not intentional, and it throws their centre back off. But you have to give him credit because he did work he led the line fantastically.
Oh, yeah, it was. We'll do it a bit early. We'll have a little bit of an appreciation for Antonio. And, me and you have probably been at times his harshest and most vocal critics. But again, I think it's also from a place of a great respect for Antonio and what he's done for us and how he's played for us. That at times we maybe hold him much higher than some other players, because he has been so pivotal. So when he does drop below the standards he has set, I think it's right that we kind of question, especially when you see the podcast stuff and he's been very vocal about his ability, and then you see things that completely contradict that, and you're just like, well, actually, hang on. No, you maybe don't deserve your flowers as much as you are proclaiming at this point. But he was brilliant last night.
I think the difficult thing when you talk about Antonio is that you have to realise that, yes, he is 34, but when he can play like that, it does make a very, very good servant to have. It's a real asset to have off the bench. However, you cannot be pushing for very top spots and in multiple competitions, and that's really going to be my key point here, is that you could maybe rely on him if you're pushing up the league. And we've had fitness issues in the past, but in one competition, maybe 2, you'd get away with it, but not when you're in the latter stages of Europe. It's nothing against Antonio. It's just the sheer amount of work that you have to do. And yes, he had a period where he was injured, but that doesn't really change the fact that when you're playing regularly, it's going to take a toll on you, and you don't have that rotation aspect. So for a player like Antonio, and for the age he is, when you are playing that many games in such frequency, it's very tough to recover and get to 100%. It's a lot of demands. You don't have the rest that you normally would. And even in terms of like a physio or personal training fitness level, if you don't have the adequate days off, you're never going to reach the full fitness. And when you are...
Oh, no, so we lost off there, guys. But no, I think to his point, Antonio is a fantastic player. With obviously quite a bad injury list to his name, and it's struggled when you've got a player that you rely on so heavily at 34 years old to consistently put those level of performances in without potential risk of injury. And we saw as the game went on, he was absolutely knackered, which isn't a surprise. He had a incredibly lonely furrow up top on his own and worked his absolute socks off. He's probably one of the only real players that you could probably say felt we could win or we could get something out of it. The way he played, the drive that he had, and the sheer determination in which to take on their defense at times, as we saw single-handedly, especially the moment where he had a great opportunity to put through Paqueta, but obviously was unable to find him. And it was just that kind of thing that wasn't necessarily matched by others. And when he set up Kudus for his opportunity, Kudus, who has been electric for us and absolutely stunning in front of goal, just lost it. He didn't hit the ball correctly and just put it straight at the goalkeeper. And it was a really, again, it was a bright moment that when we didn't then continue. And that was the real frustration. And we've just got sloughed back. How's it going, mate? You're back. But we was just saying about Antonio and obviously the struggles of keeping him fit. But again, how
couldn't keep fit.
It's all good. I've had to turn it off because I now have to hold a baby, so I'm not putting a baby on camera for me trying to keep her quiet. But you know, you can't rely on Antonio for a full 90 minutes in a game like that.
It's not so much that I
think it's unfair on him because he was saying about his fitness and stuff, and it's such a heavy burden on a player, and to not have a player that is able to take some of that pressure off him. I think Moyes tried to do that at the end by pushing Antonio out to left wing and putting Paqueta as a centre forward. But it was, again, it's the problem of not adequately having the right players. It just, you know, I feel on the players because I don't feel they've been helped, and we'll get into that later. But the tactic in itself, whilst it was brilliant for 83 minutes, in terms of stopping them from getting any real kind of true opportunities, and the chances that they had weren't clear-cut ones. They were, you know, half chances. Even Schick's fantastic header and brilliant save by Fabianski. They weren't clear-cut opportunities as such, and we were limiting what happened, you know, in front of our goal, and we were probably in control. Bar that one crazy moment with the ping pong going on in the box and Tar shooting over. It was really resolutely defended. However, that doesn't make up for our inability to control any kind of possession when we did have the ball, our inability in which to kind of exploit. But again, that's not necessarily completely down to the players. It's also down to how we were set up and to be so defensive that when we did have to break, we were so far back. And as we said, Leverkusen have energy and they have pace. They were able to get back and snuff the light out of us when we were trying to get forwards, particularly in that second half. And I think there was a lot we did right. I think a lot of how the setup went on didn't give the guys the best opportunity to do, say, as Karabag did, and to exploit them. And I feel tinged. There's a little bit of a tinge of it's not all on the players as to why.
I think it might sound harsh, but I do think you're onto something there in terms of it felt a bit like when Kudus had his little snapshot. It did kind of feel like you're watching a team that have been told you're not going to get many chances tonight. And as soon as they had that chance, it was kind of like, not the heads dropped, but there wasn't that same level of expectation that they could keep getting at Leverkusen.
Yeah, agree.
And I was watching it, and I don't understand how it, and we're going to get into the criticism a bit later, but I think this is where Paqueta really wound me up, because he was pressing and doing, but he did stupid things. And as soon as he got his yellow card, it was like he kind of just stopped pressing as much as he did. And it really took the impetus out of our attack, and what little sort of bite we had turned into something that was pretty much completely toothless. So it was a really disappointing change from the first 15 minutes to there on after.
No, exactly. I think that's the problem, isn't it? It was a stupid challenge as well. One probably born out of frustration because we weren't getting much of the ball, but it was a stupid challenge in light of you're on a yellow card. You know, with Emerson, his yellow card I had sympathy for because he actually wins the ball, but his foot's on top and then it rolls off and then onto the player. And that one, you look at it and go, that's unfortunate. That wasn't one where you've just kind of gone in petulantly. And then the fact that moments later, Paqueta makes another stupid challenge. And at that point, he was already marked, but he could have easily been sent off. Fair play to the referee, actually. He used common sense, was like, I've literally just given you a yellow card. I'm going to give you one more. That's it. That's your one. You've had your one. Now, if anything happens, it can't continue. And I think there were flashes in the game where Paqueta did some good stuff, kind of linked things. However, it was one of those games again where you just like, I think after that yellow card, I think his head went. I think the realization that he's not going to be in the next leg, in the next game, and he's also not having a good game, his head went, and he was so much on the peripherals that it just, and again, the way we played, it also didn't necessarily lean to allowing us to be on the ball or encouraging us to get on the ball enough, because we didn't necessarily push Leverkusen enough, I think, in possession. I think we did show them too much respect. And they are a great team, but I do think there was too much respect at times given to Leverkusen.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And as I said, it kind of stunk of like, you're not going to get many chances today. So when you you have to really use the ball as much as possible, because you're not going to have it much. And one of the things that I wanted to see from Paqueta after we got his card was actually just try and take more shots. I wanted to see that for more of Kudus as well. But the key thing for me was that when Kudus and Paqueta were close to each other, Paqueta was looking for the outball, and he was looking for the opposite flank, or he was looking for someone to join him. And Antonio was playing in the centre forward role, so he's in the middle of the park. But you could tell that Paqueta wanted to switch it quite a lot, and we didn't have that. And it was so frustrating, because I do think, and people were kind of laughing, but I think with Bowen, it would have been a very, very different performance, because
you'd have had Paqueta on the, you'd have Kudus on the left, so you would have had essentially two outlets on the wings that you could have passed to, and they could have alternated with Antonio, and obviously Antonio could have drifted wide, which would have meant Tar would have had to come and then say, Kudus could have come inside, which would have been, he could have exploited that space. So there would have been more options had we had Bowen, because it would have meant that we could have also then utilised Kudus in that left-hand side, where he's actually started to look far more threatening, as he's got more used to it. Not obviously the same threat as he has been on the right-hand side, but he's finding his feet on that left side for us. And as you say, yeah, we looked for the outball and there wasn't one. And it's kind of, you watch the first half, and as it draw to a close, you were kind of like, all right, we've got through that. It wasn't pretty. We had a chance. I think the way that we had those couple of opportunities, especially obviously the very first one, which to your point, I think that's what you say is right, is that we were told most likely we're not going to get many chances, so we need to be clinical. And then when we got a golden opportunity and we weren't clinical, is that, oh, when are we going to get the next one? And that negativity, I think, plays into the minds of players, in that they're conscious that even their manager's saying you're not going to get many chances today. So when you do, you need to take it. And when you miss one, which was arguably a gilt-edged chance, and I say that because it's Kudus, you then start to, are we going to get another opportunity? And then when it takes so long to get the next one, you get through the first one, like, okay, well, we've ground that out. We've got through. We've stopped them from really having some really, true opportunities. Fabianski made a couple of smart saves. And then you kind of think, well, the second half, we maybe got to come out a bit more, because we're showing they're making space. And obviously, because how much we allowed them to come onto us, that at times they had their entire team, bar the goalkeeper, in our final third. And it's those kind of moments. And obviously, Antonio, fair play to him, at the time recognised, I need to stay up at the halfway line. I need to be that player who doesn't allow them to then all come forward into our final third. And I think Antonio actually showed really good intelligence at times, especially with that kind of thing, because it's very easy to get sucked into, I need to drop deep to help the defence and to provide a player they can play off of. But by sitting higher, a couple of opportunities, particularly the one where he took on 3 of their defenders. Yes, there was some luck in it, but took on 3 defenders brilliantly and almost bulldozed his way into a position where he set up Paqueta for a tap-in. We didn't necessarily, as a team, recognise we need to push up a bit more. We need to try and squeeze them. And yes, we looked to restrict the central space, which arguably didn't do a huge amount because their movement and their passing is so good, they were consistently finding each other. We at times probably disengaged too much. As I say, gave a bit too much respect, and getting through that first half was good. And then that second half, you're thinking, well, we can't keep playing in the same way because we are, as we said on the before, they're like a boa constrictor. The more, every time you take a breath in, they'll get tighter. And every time we took a step backwards, they encroached. Every time we went back again, they encroached further. So it's very difficult to allow or to do that for 90 plus minutes because you are arguably playing with fire. I know people will say they didn't create a huge amount. It's almost irrelevant because if you give people enough chances, the law of averages will always go against you, as we saw. And that's kind of what happens. And we mentioned again about the strength and depth that they have. And I said, on our review, this is a game of attrition, and it could all hinge on the bench. And ultimately, it's what happened. They brought on the likes of Hoffman, who had a positive impact. Obviously, Boniface came on. Hinkepe. You talk about the standard of players they're bringing on, and they're able to, obviously they're fairly fresh anyway because they've had a lot of the ball, and they're able to freshen up the team even more. And it's just one of those things where you really, really then start to worry as you started to see those players coming in. How do we keep going? And obviously we also lost Mavropanos. I think around about the 70th, 80th minute maybe. Again, it was frustrating. But I tell you what, before we get into the second half, there is one incident in the first half that we haven't talked about, and I think we probably should. Was it for you a penalty with the Jonathan Tah and Antonio incident? For you, was it a penalty? I would say no, and I'll explain why. I feel it was a no. It wasn't a penalty, but it'd be good to get your take on it, Sloth.
No, it was handbags at dawn. It was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. They're all over each other. And, you can say, Tar holds his shirt at one point, but Antonio's basically just pushed him. It's blatant. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. If anything, I was a bit more cynical of some of the holding from corners that we had. I think there's one where Tapsoba has Zuma or Antonio in a headlock. I think it might have even happened twice.
To be fair, we had one corner in the game, but again, you're right.
It might have been a set piece.
Yeah, it would have been a set piece. Yeah,
it was quite. I'm not complaining because the referee did let a lot go, and it was a physical game, but for me, that's not a penalty. It's handbags at dawn. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. And if you're going to give a penalty like that, you put yourself in a very difficult position because as soon as there's any sort of push in the box, and a player goes down, throws themselves to the ground, you kind of built a rod for your own back where you have to give it because you've given it at the other end. And yeah, I think it would have been very harsh. He and Antonio were obviously in the middle of a very physical battle, but no, I don't think it's a penalty. You could maybe get away with that if you're Mo Salah or if you're, Saka, and that happens to you. I think maybe you get it, but that's never a penalty in my
I
opinion.
think, it's the action of Antonio. Not saying that what he did was wrong. I think the action of him, because he pushed Tar and showed how physically strong he is by pushing him away twice. I think had he not gone for the push, particularly the second time when Tar had his shirt and his shirt was literally pulled off his back, because if he had not kind of gone for a push and kind of tried to move away and his shirt came over his head, or he basically pulled his shirt off because of the way he was holding it, then he would have been given us a penalty, because there's no way you can then say, well, he hasn't impeded him. He's literally grabbed his shirt and pulled off his back. And people will say, well, he did. It's like, but no, because the problem is that second one where it looked like the shirt was coming off, that was because of the action of Antonio shoving Tar and Tar having a hold of his shirt. So that's the reason why, for me, the refs never gave it. It's the reason why I wouldn't say it's a foul, because you say it's 6-1, half dozen in the other, because they were both trying to push. It was, arguably decent centre back play in how he was trying to marshal Antonio. And, the way Antonio went down was theatrical, bearing in mind how physically strong he showed he was. When the ball went past him, I felt when I saw that as, you've now tried to go for a penalty by going down, because it wasn't, I don't think there was enough force in that last collision or that last interaction between the two to force Antonio to go down as he did. And if we'd have won it, we'd be praising Antonio for smart play and good centre forward play. I don't think he's at fault for missing the ball. I don't think he missed the ball to go down. He couldn't get the ball at all. And he's like, well, I'm in contact and we've been very physical. So I think at that point, the referee is they're going to side with, 6-1, half dozen the other. I think it was a right call, to be honest.
Well, look, for me, if you give that one and say Zuma backs into Boniface at the end, then you're looking at giving a penalty for that. And as you say, it's what you would deem smart centre forward play if it's given your way, but that's not really what the law is there for. It's supposed to be fair, and we complain a lot about Antonio not getting the fouls that he's due, but I thought that it would have been disingenuous to give that. It's one of those where it's a reaction caused by an action, and it's if Zuma backed into Boniface before he jumps and Boniface falls down and can't reach the header, then technically he's kind of done the same thing. So it's not a penalty for me. As I said, I think there was some holding at set pieces that were a bit more suspect in my opinion. But other than that, I actually thought the ref had a pretty good game. You could even argue that, the refs were definitely better than the Prem refs, that's for sure. But you could even argue that Paqueta got very lucky, because in Europe that could easily have been a red card. And
in Europe, we've seen that as a red card. So I think,
and look, how many times have we seen things like Emerson's tackle be given for a red card in the Premier League? If
I think there's a good level. To be fair, I think there was a good level of common sense last night from the referees. Yeah. Yes, it was frustrating that we didn't really get anything, and we ended up with the 2 yellow cards. However, one was definitely warranted in Paqueta's, and Emerson's even said in commentary, that seems harsh. And I think that's right. I think it was harsh because the way the challenge went, his foot was on the ball and it rolled off. So I wouldn't necessarily say Emerson deserved his, but now we lose him for the next leg. But let's talk about the second half, Sloth. The war of attrition started. They made plenty of subs. We also lost Mavropanos, who I think yet again had yet another good game. He's really starting to get some form. And then, great save from Fabianski from the Schick header off of Grimaldo. And then the inevitable happened in the 83rd minute. But prior to that, obviously, there was that ping ball moment we mentioned earlier. Again, made a brilliant stop. Souček then made a block. And then Souček cleared off the line, and then Tar absolutely funded it over. I think we do sometimes forget that in that sequence they could have scored. Obviously, they got the other two. So they had opportunities, and they were starting to make warnings to us. They were applying pressure at that point consistently, and there's I think as their name is Leverkusen, they struck, and I think for the pair of us, I think we both had some questions around Fabianski's ability, as particularly on the first and the second goals.
No, I think the first one for me is just you have to be saving that at that level. Or even if you don't save it, you have to jump for it. And for me, it just felt like he fell in stages. It was so slow. And I think that's the difference between Areola and Fabianski. I fully expect Areola to make that save that Fabianski pulled off. I also expect him to be at least diving and reaching.
I think it's the lack of anticipation. The ball was only, in my opinion, from where he's been shot, it's probably only really going in one direction. And when you saw him diving, I said to both of you last night, he didn't look 38, he looked 83. The way he went down for that ball, it's just the fact that I don't mind if he, anticipated it was going to go to the right and the ball went to the left. I think because that could have taken a deflection, but I think the ball only really had one place it could go, and I just think the lack of anticipation and the slowness in getting down was really disappointing. And he had a good game to that point, and I think again that just was such a disappointing, soft goal to concede, in my opinion.
And it's almost one of those where we see a lot of people say that Fabianski commands his box well, but if you're the keeper there and Mavropanos is in two minds about whether to put his foot out for it, you have to be making that call, and you have to be saying, I'm going to dive for it, because if you're going to stay on your feet, you're almost waiting for that centre back to get their foot on it and see where it's going to go next. You have to shout and tell him what's going on. So I was really disappointed with that. It might seem a bit harsh, but I just thought they're the kind of things that will win or lose you ties at this level of football.
The difference makers, though, aren't they? I get your point. Maybe it is us being a bit harsh, but however, for a top level goalkeeper, the ball wasn't necessarily moving at a pace.
No, it wasn't a well struck goal. It wasn't like it, powered into the back of the net. It's
one of the ones where he's decided I'm going to go late because I want to be ready in case there's a deflection. However, that decision ultimately caused the problem. And again, I can't put it any other way than it being. It was a soft goal. It really was soft.
Well, no, I completely agree. And people might find the fact that we're picking at moments when we had such little possession quite kind of needless. But when you're looking at the tie, football is often won. And we've said before, David Moyes is a moments manager, and he relies on the team creating those moments, specifically on the counter attack, to go on and win a game, to go on and get something from a 90-minute match of football. And whether you think that's right or wrong, personally, you and I, Mike, we think that is wrong.
100%.
And I think that Xabi Alonso, we said again in the Aston Villa game, the 2-2 draw, Unai Emery got them that point to a degree because he made the changes that impacted how they played. And you have to take your hat off to Xabi Alonso. His changes have got him that 2-goal margin, and it's a bit of great management from him, but it's also a damning bit of management, in my opinion, on Moyes, and the fact that he clearly doesn't trust his bench. He clearly doesn't feel comfortable rotating them onto the pitch. And when you look at our starting 11, it's a fantastic starting 11 on paper. When all our best players are on the pitch, you go, that is a team that should be making the Europa League and the knockout rounds. However, as soon as you start to see one or two drop, that's when the cracks can come in. And that was the difference. And we spoke about strength in depth, but for a manager not to have a plan B when they have, repeatedly stuck with this squad and not made changes that they could have done, or not recruited to the level that they should have done, that's where things start to add up for me. And you know, we were both speaking about Boniface in the summer. I know.
Yeah,
I'm a very big fan of his. I have been for a long time, but he was also in one of my threads on babbling about a long-term option to replace Antonio. So it's very frustrating to see a player who fits a system so well come on and score against you when you've been harping on about him for so long.
And he scores from a set piece, something that we are famed for in the Premier League.
Yeah.
However, we haven't scored one in such a long time. It's almost, there's a kick in the balls, and then there's that, which is basically like a double tap. It's just it's so frustrating.
It's very irritating to see as well when a manager comes out and says it's a hard position to buy, or there aren't many players out there who we feel can fit that position. Well, yeah, there might not be players that you feel are that feel can do that position, but when the alternative is Danny Ings, and it's nothing against Danny Ings because he's looked pretty sharp in cameos where he's come absolutely on, but you have to question Moyes again here, because he's looked sharp when he came on against Burnley, yet where have we seen him since? You know,
well, you look at the Tottenham game. He got him all stripped, got him ready, and then he sat him down and made 0 subs for that game.
So what is,
he made Johnson this one as a sub,
and that's what really frustrates me, is that, you know, we're talking about a very intense game of football that was won on substitutions, and I would say that it was very much lost on a lack of substitutions from our point. And the substitutions that were made because they were reactionary. You know, Mavropanos came off because he had a knock, and you could argue that that was the big thing that cost us for Boniface's goal, because he just manages to get free in the area. Now,
yeah, I agree. I think if Mavropanos is on pitch, I think we defend that
100%. You know, 100%. And Aguerd is about as useful as a fart in a hurricane. He doesn't have any idea what's going on around him. At set pieces, he seems like a completely different player to the one that we saw in France. And he was more his top target. You know, he was his top defensive target. So it's a real head scratcher at times when people talk about how much we've spent and the lack of options on the bench. I understand we're trying to have a bit of a clear out and a bit of a change. A lot of these players that Sullivan has brought in, or, you know, his gifts that he's parted onto the squad. However, that's not an excuse. Not an excuse when you've had so much money to spend. And it is incredibly frustrating that, yet again, we've got to say it, January has completely bitten us in the backside. It's
absolutely good. And I'm just going to raise one of the quotes that Moyes said, and we'll talk about the recruitment, and we'll talk about 2 subs that we made. Obviously, one was enforced, and obviously we'll talk about actually at the point in the game, and which will lead into yet another rant from us with regards to our recruitment. But Moyes made the point in saying after the game, now again, this might be slightly redacted and slightly certain aspects of the quote left out, but this is a segment of it. We're probably playing a Champions League team tonight. We qualified for the competition by winning the Conference League, so there's probably a gap in which show tonight. Now, Bayer Leverkusen qualified for this through the league. Yes, they are Champions League quality. However, we play in the Premier League, which has multiple Champions League level teams we have also beat in recent years. And it's every time we seem to lose against someone else, it seems to be it's their quality and we're just not good enough. It tells us to think like a big team. When we then lose a game, it's actually maybe we should not think like a big team. Maybe we should actually go with the little old West Ham thing, because when we lose, then there's no questions being said against actually, well, why did we lose? How did we lose that game? What about it did we not do well? And As you said, they made subs. Yes, they had quality. Of course, they had quality, but they had quality because they have invested and recruited. I think there was someone put out earlier today. I saw in the same period, we have spent 250 million net on players. Bayer Leverkusen has spent 50 million on players. Now, I know it's a different league and they're able to develop, however. But again, if we're talking about, he's stating, oh, well, they have far too much quality. We've been here for 4 years. Where's the quality that he's done? We've brought in players that have been misprofiled. Skamaka, for instance, scored 2 goals last night at Anfield and 2 very quality, well, one in particular, very quality goal of the obviously left of that volley. Again, misprofiled, but that was a player that Moyes reportedly wanted. Yet completely misprofiled that player. Allaire is another one we've had who, as soon as he left, had a great season at Ajax, went on to then have a phenomenal season at Dortmund. These are players that we're bringing in, or we have, and then we're unable to get something out of them, unless they're a burly winger that we turn into a centre forward. So Arnautovic, Antonio, we do not seem to have the ability or the understanding of how to work a striker. Only players that seem to work as centre forwards for us or as a winger that we then move. So which makes you then go, well, Watkins is the epitome of that type of player that would have probably worked. Again, I know we've mentioned in the past about Solanke. Whether Solanke would have worked is another question. Is he similar enough to Antonio and diverse enough in which to work within the team? Is a question as to would we get the same out of him what Bournemouth are getting out of him this year? Possibly, well, but I don't know. But again, when we hear comments about the quality of our team, it's, well, you as a club, David Moyes, the club, allowed Fornals and Benrahma to go. You as a club allowed that to happen. You then went and brought in Calvin Phillips, who's been a catastrophic error of judgment and an absolute waste of money.
Transfer.
Yeah, and now he's got an injury. Seriously, I've seen more useful flat tires than I've seen with him. It's ridiculous, and it's just so poor, mate. It's so poor. We've had some good ones. Sorry, I'll finish in a minute. We've had some really good quality signings, like the likes of Kudus, etc., who have really, pushed the team on and taken us to another level in certain aspects. But by and large, the overall squad recruitment and the integration of, say, even youth in which to facilitate and help some of that aspects of, not necessarily the money to get to a certain level has been beyond poor. Absolutely diabolical.
I completely agree with you in terms of the recruitment outside a certain agent's client pool. And, I'm not going to mention any names. We all know who I'm referring to when I talk about favourable agents with a certain owner. However, that's also a bit of a scapegoat because, as you mentioned, he has had a lot of money to spend. The issue that I have, and this is taking nothing away from what Leverkusen have done, because they have knocked Bayern off their perch, and Bayern are in a massive mess at the moment. A lot of their players don't look like they're even following what Tuchel and what Nagelsmann.
I think it's even been clearly stated that they are pretty much not listening to Tuchel at all now.
And apparently Nagelsmann is in contact with the players because he's going to come in next season, and he said, I want you to try this. So they're ignoring Tuchel, and apparently they're also ignoring him. So it's a complete chaos at the moment at Bayern. Their defense has been catastrophic. If we think Zuma's been bad, Upamecano has been terrible. Like he's been a level below Kurt Zouma, and that's saying something. They are so bad at the back that they've actually managed to go and get Spurs centre back and bring him in, and that's made a little bit of an improvement. But it's incredibly frustrating to see people go, oh, they're the best team in Europe, or what they're doing is unprecedented in football. It's very impressive, and I take nothing away from it. But when Xabi Alonso came in, obviously Steichen was one of the people who was key in appointing him. However, he had a budget, and they had spent quite a lot of money. You look at the figures they spent on Patrick Schick. I think it was 35 million euros. They'd spent money, and it's not a case of he's come into Leicester City and they've won the title. It's a case of he's had great resources. He has this network behind him, and they've gone on and utilised that in a very poor season in the Bundesliga. Something I said in the preview, but it's been a very poor season in the Bundesliga.
Oh yeah, they've absolutely capitalised on teams.
What my key point is that when people cite this, I think it's very different when people look at this sort of Premier League tax that they have, where a player comes in from abroad and maybe they flop, maybe they struggle, like Haller, like Scamacca, but they can be utilised in a certain way. And that's one of those things that, you might be paying £35 million for a Scamacca or an Haller. However, if you utilise them correctly, they don't have to suit your system, say 80% of the time. But if that 20% gets you 10 goals, gets you 12 goals, maybe 5 of those win you a game, that's 15 points. Right. If they add up and they take you through to the next round of a cup, that's revenue. It's money paid back. It's fan sales through t-shirts. It's all these things that help push that deal on paper and in the bank balance. But then you've also got to look at it from an on-field perspective. So if you know that you've got Antonio and you think, okay, I've signed Scamacca, he's not quite gelled with the team, so we need another Antonio. Go out and sign one. You go out and sign Boniface. You use the recruitment you have, which we know it's not like Boniface just snuck under the radar. You're scoring for fun. So you go out and you sign Boniface. You go out and you sign Boniface, and you go, okay, we've now got 3 players. If one of them's unhappy, I quite frankly don't care. You're the manager, and you go, show me why you should play. This is what strength in depth is. And we all go, oh, but we'll have an unhappy squad. No, the point is you should have a squad that is all working towards a goal. And if you can't do that, you need to ask major questions as to why, and you need to ask questions of the manager. Why can you not deal with this player? Because that is what separates the top coaches from the coaches who struggle to control egos. And it's what separates people like Pep Guardiola and Xabi Alonso in this season. When he can rotate with Boniface and Schick when fit, that's the mark of a good manager. And that I'm gonna finish that little rant there, but I think that is what is really gonna separate us. And do we have that ambition to spend £20 million on a Boniface who can come in and push for that starting spot, and we can have the time to settle in, or even utilise off the bench in the cup competitions properly? Or are we just going to go, well, he hasn't scored for 20 in the 20 minutes he's been on the pitch, I'm not going to play him next week, and he can think about what he's done? Because that's what it feels like with Danny Ings, and that's what's going to separate managers coming into West Ham. Whether Moyes stays and he's allowed to choose a forward that he trusts, it's going to be sink or swim for him. It's going to be sink or swim for whoever comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And had we kept Scamacca, yes, he wasn't happy, but again, we could have gone for someone like Boniface, because that way we had reservations because of injuries or reservations because of the leagues he's played in, you would have had the safety net of, you have Antonio, you have Scamacca, who's been here a year and hopefully would play, to a better standard, if not. And then you had Boniface, and then you would have had also the option that come January, you could have said, right, Scamacca, it's not working, we're happy to move you on now, we're going to sell you or put you out on loan. And you look at how he doesn't fit Atalanta. Scamacca doesn't. Last 5 games, he's got 5 in 5 in the for the last 5. Scored 2 last night at Anfield. And it's that frustration of, we have these players, and even though they don't fit in other clubs, they still seem to do well. Which then you have the question as to, well, it can't just be. We can't just say, oh, it's the curse of West Ham, because, well, why is there a curse? And I'm not saying it's all on Moyes. It's not, because the players always have to take a level of responsibility. However, when you consistently see people leaving and performing to a much higher standard, or playing in a completely different way, kind of showing their ability, then you do then have to take an introverted look and think, well, there is clearly something not clicking. We've seen Kudus has been phenomenal for us. Obviously, Alvarez, there has been a lot we have got right. However, there has been a phenomenal amount we've got wrong. If you look at even the likes of, Downs, I know a lot of fans like Downs. A lot of people want to see Downs come back. Me and you, I'd say, are probably on the other side of that fence saying, let's hope Southampton get promoted so they can give us 20 odd million for him. But again, it's a case of we went and spent £12 million on a defensive midfielder, played him at times as an attacking midfielder, basically because he could press, and we gave up on him after a year and sent him out on loan. Now, he may get us a profit. So in the end, it is a good deal because it's earned us money. However, it just showed what a bad move it was. We talked at the time that there was, Jean Anana, for instance, was an example of someone who would have been cheap because of relegation, etc., who we could have gone for, who would have given the exact kind of same things. And again, you look at Phillips, there are other players that we could do that. We don't even look internally. We have, as we've seen over the last 2 years now, because we're down how well the under-21s are doing, we have arguably one of the best, or probably in the top 5 youth academies in the UK. However, we do not see any of those players coming through. And what really bugged me again last night was we went 1-0 down and he brings on 2 defensive players. Now, I know Danny Ings and I know Maxwell Cornet have not probably shown enough to warrant being given, huge amounts of minutes. However, you're taking off Kudus and you're bringing on Johnson. You're telling Bayer Leverkusen and you're telling the players, I'm happy with a 1-0 defeat. I'll take that. And then when it comes 2-0, you just think, well, you might as well just bloody try to go for it in the last few minutes and lose 2-0 than to arguably set up to only lose 1-0 and then lose 2. It's so frustrating. And again, I think it just shows his mentality of that, well, I'd rather lose by 1 than to lose by 2 when we end up doing that. But also it's that idea of, I'll take it, that'll do. And it's like it's a pre-made ready argument of, well, they've got much better quality. Look at their bench compared to ours. It's like, but you've been responsible for this standard of bench. You've had time to build. You've got players on the bench that you do not use. Some of those are players that you have wanted to sign, like Cornet, Danny Ings, who've been a long-time admirer. These are players that you have either admired or wanted, and then you've had them and you've cast them aside and given no route or chance back into the team. You got rid of or allowed for the club to move on Ben Rama and Fornals. And we're now in a situation where we're in the Premier League where pretty much every game now is must win. For argument's sake, because we need to be winning games. We've only won 3 Premier League games since the turn of the year. You just got to sit there and go, much as Moyes has done great, and we will, if he does lose, won't leave, at the end of the we will eulogise about Moyes, and we'll also, if we get knocked out next week, we will eulogise about this journey as well that we've gone on over the last few years in Europe and how much we do have to praise Moyes. But it's always going to be this tinge of what could have been had.
Yeah.
You might taken responsibility to do more in terms of recruitment, or if the club had actually turned around and gone, laid down the law and said, no, hang on. We can't allow this squad to be as thin as this, and we believe this player is the right player for us, both in the short term and the long term. You are going to have to make it work and actually put pressure on the manager. But they haven't. They've just kind of allowed it to go through. Because as I say, there's always seemed this mentality at West Ham. And I think you said it earlier as well. And I know you did it on the tweet earlier with 3-3 terrible January windows where we just completely shot ourselves in the foot. Last year we got, I would say, an element of luck in terms of we won Europa League, and obviously we managed to get out of our Conference League and get our predicament in the league. But this year we had another great opportunity where we could have pushed on. We had the money from Skamaka, which we didn't spend. We had other bits of money as well. We didn't spend it. We put all our eggs in the basket on Calvin Phillips. The board completely shot out the Osman deal because they wanted Rowe or they wanted whoever has been talked about. But the fact of the matter is, we then did nothing. If they wanted him, they should have got him. Yes, it may have annoyed Moyes, but if you're not planning to give him a contract at the end of the year, that does not matter. So it just then sit there and go, it's just a laissez-faire attitude. It's just that'll do. It's fine. we'll just model through and we'll see how we go, and you know we'll go again in the summer. And it's not ultimately
It's
there's a
not. It's
fan
not
base.
progression. It's not progression at all. And look, could you imagine if we'd gone to Blackburn and we'd seen Crystal Palace go and agree a fee, and we go, look, we'll give you £7 million straight up front, and say we say, I don't know what Adam Wharton's on at the moment at Crystal Palace, but say he's on 50 grand a week. Yeah, that's still 100 grand less than we're paying Phillips every single week. So imagine if you'd gone to them first day in the window and you say to him, we're going to give you 50 grand. We want you to be part of the midfield and we're going to get you on the pitch, getting minutes. You might be off the bench for a little bit, but go out there and impress us. You're going to save 100 grand in wages. I would be very surprised if £7 million wasn't a good first instalment for Blackburn to accept. And then obviously you agree the £20 million fee, whatever it might be, and you can plan that in instalments. But the lack of ambition, we said it was quite an ambitious signing, but when I talk about the lack of ambition, I mean bringing players in after that and to just go, okay, well, we've got one central defensive mid, that's fine. However, you didn't get a winger. And it came back against Leverkusen to bite us in the backside, because having a pacey outlet who could carry the ball, square it back to Antonio, or find Kudus on the other side would have absolutely torn Leverkusen apart. And if you don't agree with that, that's fair enough. That's your opinion. But I would say that it's very difficult to have watched last night's game and go, we could have had Tar on toast, or we could have had Tap sober. He could have been up against a very different animal if we have three pacey attackers. And that's what is really disappointing for me about last night's performance, was that it was a very nasty way to summarize the feeling at West Ham at the moment, which is, we are pushing on and people will go, oh, Moyes has got you competing in Europe. But it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable football, and it's not a sustainable approach off the pitch. It's also not a sustainable approach with the squad, because you're relying on aging players, you're relying on a thin squad, and you're not progressing in any way forward.
Physically demanding as well, and it's
exactly.
You're asking the players to do a war of attrition every game. You're going to have to play a lot without the ball, and whilst we have been very successful and very good at it, we can't deny that we have been successful. We have been good at it. Those players have aged. And to play that way and in that manner and then deplete the squad as we have, you are genuinely asking for trouble, and you're asking for injuries. And whilst, the Bowen injury was innocuous, it's still an injury that is arguably caused by not having the ability to rotate. And what we then see is that we then don't have a player to come in for him. We push Kudus over to that side. So yes, that's an adequate replacement. But then the knock-on effect to the rest of the squad, again, it's that, and there always seems to be this sometimes at these moments where I said to you guys in the review, it's going to be the same team that beat Wolves. The same team that finished will be the team that plays.
Yeah.
Because it's an affirmation in a way, in that that team, I put that team on the second half, we played well, and it did change the game. They did play better, which isn't much of a leap because we were shocking in the first half. That team won me a game, therefore they deserve to then start the next one. And sometimes that's not how it should be.
Well, look, I'm not going to sit here and complain too much about the tactics, because the teams that have got the best against Leverkusen, they have got a point, or they have, put up a really good performance against Leverkusen. They've sat back and they've soaked up the pressure and they've hit them on the counter. We saw Stuttgart do that in the league, and they did it in the cup as well. And granted, they lost in the last minute of normal time, pretty much. I think it was even it was Jonathan Tah, their big right back, who it was Jonathan Tah, I think, who got the goal for Leverkusen. But Stuttgart performed really well, and they play a three at the back. Bayern lost to Stuttgart, to Leverkusen. I'm muddling my teams. Bayern lost to Leverkusen. That's a very difficult sentence to say. By trying to basically control the match, and then Leverkusen just kept putting great balls into the box, and they won it 3-2. It's a case of the teams that have done well against Leverkusen have generally sat back and hit on the counter. Karabakh did exactly the same thing, and they got 4 goals in 2 games against them.
Yeah, and I principally haven't got a problem with the tactic. We did very well.
But I'm not saying anything about the terms of the tactics negatively. But what I'm saying is that it's how you coach the team, and it's also the substitutions that you make in the match that will determine that. Now, look, Cornet doesn't deserve the start because we haven't seen him. He doesn't deserve to come on the pitch. But when you're playing a system that is so reliant on a counter-attacking style, he needs to come on, or a player with pace needs to come on so you can keep the intensity, because that would have potentially kept it at 1-0. That may have even got you an equaliser. But changing the system just because you think, okay, we're going to sit back here, lads, it's not going to work against Leverkusen. You have to keep playing things that have continually gotten sides points or even goals against them. And we just didn't do that. We seem to change it about, as you said, 15 minutes from the end. And that's what's really frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. There was an opportunity there with Leverkusen. I'm not saying that we would have won, but I did say that I thought we potentially lose 2-1. I thought we would at least get a goal because they would give us an opportunity and we would find ourselves taking it. I think the mentality potentially was, put to the players. And, when you see Moyes' comments after the game, it's, we're probably reading between lines and, 1-1, making 3. But it does feel like the players were probably told, it was suggested to them that there's going to be a lack of opportunities today. And when we do get those, we need to be clinical and we need to be structured, and we need this, we need that. We need to kind of make sure we don't come out of our shape too much. And when we do get an opportunity, we have to take it, because we're probably only going to get maybe 1 or 2 of those. And the one that we got came so early that after that, there seemed to be no real conviction. There was a couple of, the fantastic run Antonio did against 3 defenders, and not only with Paqueta anywhere near. We've seen, again, we've said it, doesn't deserve to start, doesn't necessarily deserve to come on as a sub. However, pace is always deadly and a great equaliser. And we've also seen Cornet come on in a couple of games this year and make an impact and getting an assist. Not to say that he would have done it last night, but again, sometimes you just don't know. That's why we always talk up why do we not give youth a chance? We've got young players like George Murphy, for instance. We don't know. He's not going to potentially go on to be another, Florian Wirtz. However, he could be a very useful player for us as an attacking midfielder. Again, it's young legs. It's a player that will run, he will just run hard. You can bring that player on and put him on the wing. You don't need to put him in a midfield position if you're concerned about him, but you can put him on the wing. Yes, there's going to be a level of, learning on the job because it's not his natural place. But again, it's that energy, it's that enthusiasm, it's something different to bring in. And
exactly.
We both think Johnson should get a contract. I don't think Johnson should be coming on in midfield. I certainly don't think he should be coming on from Kudus, who was an absolute outlet when we needed him at times. And yes, he got suffocated and stopped, etc., quite a lot by Bayer Leverkusen, but he was an outlet. And in the 83rd minute, when you're 1-0 down, you need to keep those outlets on so you have an outball. You may not score, but you need that outball to stop that pressure, because as we said with Leverkusen, and as it's very clear in stats, they score a vast majority of goals late on in the game, and that's because they just pummel you and they consistently turn the screw time and time again. And we got what we deserved in that sense because we were knackered, and I don't blame the players for the goals because, quite frankly, emotionally, physically, they were shattered by the end of the game. And to lose 2-0, you would say, based on the number of shots they had, number of opportunities, warranted. Based on the opportunities that actually happened when you look at the game, it probably wasn't one where 2-0 is right, because the first one was a bit of a scuff. The second one was a good header. I do think Ariella might have saved it. But again, it's those we talk about all the time, Moyes-like moments, and when we fail to play in certain moments and concede, and we don't make enough, we fail to make any moments really bar one in a game, you're asking for trouble. And what I would say is probably losing in some ways is a good thing for us, because it means in the next leg he just has to go for it.
Yeah.
Yes, we may concede early. If we concede early, that's fine. I personally feel that we are probably out as it stands. If we play as we did in this one, we obviously can't be gung-ho, but we have to go in that second leg, because you can't ask West Ham fans to turn up to support the team and you turn up 2-0 down and you just try and play the same way. We have to be, attack-minded. We probably aren't going to have Bowen, Ings and Cornet don't deserve to start, but necessarily they may have to. We may have to just go. We're going to have to go all out. We need to put Kudus up there with Antonio, with Cornet, and with and play essentially a front four, and just have the rest sit behind and go. You four are just going to have to try and work it out on your own. We're going to have to we're going to sit in, try and control things, and you four are going to have to just try and force something in the counter-attack. There is enough there, I would think, in that four. Three of them have very good pace, and Danny Ings actually has shown when he's able to play in the front two and drop a bit deeper, he's incredibly useful in that situation. So I don't think we'll do it, obviously, and I don't necessarily think those two do deserve to start. I know I sound like I contradict myself, but we've got to try something different. We're 2-0 down. What difference does it make if we play those guys and we lose? What difference does it make?
I think we'll just go 4-3-3, and we'll put Alvarez right in front of the defence. We'll put Souček in that central defensive mid kind of role next to him in that pivot, and then we'll let James Ward-Prowse run around like a headless chicken and try and link things up, which he can do. So we'll physically bully them with Souček and Alvarez. Hopefully we can get something early on. I think if we do, the place is going to be rocking, and it's how Leverkusen react to that. But they've got the pace to hurt us. They've got the players to hurt us. And I think, and if we concede the first goal, then yeah, I think it'll be good night Vienna. But it's just a case of we stick to a system, we bully them physically, which we can do.
I think if we was to go for it and we conceded the first, I think the fans will turn around and go, yeah, look, it's crap. We're 1-0 down and we're now blatantly out. And it may completely flatten the atmosphere, but people will actually, after they get over themselves, will turn around and we at least tried. We tried to go for it. Yes, it backfired. However, we tried something. It didn't work. We've had a good run, in Europe. You can be a bit philosophical after it, but I think people just want to see at times us have more kind of impetus in which to try and cause the opposition problems rather than trying to nullify their strengths. And I think that's been a big problem. I know we even talked about, I think, the last one where United players were even saying that there was too much talking around the opposition strengths and how we're going to nullify them and stop them, as opposed to how we're going to exploit their weaknesses and how we're going to play. I think Arsene Wenger always, I very rarely concentrate on the opposition, because I'm convinced in how I play and how my team plays that we will win. So I work on patterns that I want them to play in a game. Sometimes it was naive and you got beat. However, 9 times out of 10, you probably would win that game. And it's a philosophy that I probably go to a bit more, because it's more positive, and I like to see that positive football. And one shot in the game against Bayer Leverkusen is a bit of a damning indictment, really, of our ability to create in the final third when we did get there, because we did create opportunities in which to get in their final third. However, the final ball decision making, however you want to put it, wasn't good enough to trouble Leverkusen enough, and that's why we're in the predicament we're in. And now we have to go for the last game. But
just praying Bowen's fit and we can have Bowen, Kudus, and Antonio. But if he's not, I think you basically say to Cornet, you're playing for your future. Because
at least you make the point of you're playing for your move away. Go out there and prove to clubs why they should come and get you in the summer. That.
And speaking of moving away, I think it's probably time we wrap this hour and minute shindig up.
But anyway, I'm going to say, in terms of the game, it was painful. I think Antonio was the best player on the pitch for us.
Yeah.
There are some positives and there is some light. However, we need to be the team that scores first in the next leg. And if we do have Bowen back, I do think that's going to be a great thing. And to your point, Sloth, maybe the loss of Paqueta isn't as bad as it has been in the Premier League because of how much we're going to have to do defensively and how much we need to play on the counter. That potentially Paqueta not being in the team isn't going to hurt us some more. But you can have the last say before we wrap up and we end this.
No, I think it's just let's all try and get behind the team on Thursday. I'm going to be at the Fulham game. You know, hopefully we get 3 points there. I think it will be a big statement if we can turn it around and do that. Go into the game against Leverkusen on a positive. But no, thank you very much everyone for watching, and hopefully we'll see you after the Fulham game with 3 points under the belt and maybe some news on Bowen.
Yeah, totally agree. And thanks everyone for joining. Sorry we didn't get through as many of the comments as I wanted to. We probably just needed a bit of a rant and a bit of a kind of a dive in. But I hope you've enjoyed. Please do like, please do subscribe if you don't already. Everyone have a great weekend. Let's hope, as Sloth says, we get 3 points against Fulham and we can keep ourselves going in the league and try and push ourselves forward. I'll be there as well, Sloth. So let's hope we come back with 3 points and not come back depressed. But again, everyone, thanks for watching. We'll see you all again soon. And come on, you Irons, I guess.
Come on, you Irons.